Hi y'all, welcome to the Knit+Sip pod. I'm Kate. Sarah's traveling this week, so we're filming a little bit of a different episode. When I first launched the podcast, I had focused on some beginner projects because I thought that when I was a beginner, I wanted some more information out there about like what projects I could do other than just a dishcloth. And so this episode is going to be a little bit more focused on what I would say is more beginner level projects, some patterns that I've come up with that will be part of the 2025 beginner series that I do. And so these patterns are going to be available on my website as of December 20th. So very shortly, so you can go out to my website and get the patterns. And between now and January 1st, they will be free. And then after that, there will be a small fee for the patterns. So I will put the link to my website pattern section in the description here. But even if you aren't getting started with knitting, these are some great projects. The reason I wanted to do this episode right now is because we're getting ready to go into a few weeks where we might have a little bit more time at home. We might want a little bit of a break with, some relaxing knitting, things that we can do while we're with our families. So maybe not like a sweater where you're counting, things like that, but this will be kind of just like a mindless knit that is going to be very satisfactory in the end. So a couple of projects to show you here, and I'm not going to necessarily talk about a ton of tips and tricks here as far as like showing a cast on or anything, but I will show just some general tips and tricks, a little bit of seaming. So seaming is something I actually really like to do, and I know that that kind of scares a lot of people, so thought I would just cover a little bit of seaming in this too, and just a few tips and tricks. So all of these patterns are actually a 1x1 rib. So if you've never done ribbing is, after someone masters the knit stitch and the purl stitch, when I'm teaching them, I encourage them within the first couple of projects they do to do a ribbed project, because ribbing is part of a lot of things that we do as knitters. So, the cuffs, the hem, the collar of sweaters, something around like a glove or a hand warmer. It was something that I learned pretty early on for a hat. And I remember when I learned, I really struggled because I wasn't moving the yarn back and forth between the middle of the needles. And so these are some great, pretty low risk projects where if you are learning, it's a great way to practice. It's also something where if you're learning to continental knit, this might be something good. Ribbing is usually faster if you continental knit, so this might be good practice for you. Again, a pretty low risk project to learn that on because gauge and tension are a lot less important with these projects. So again, great for every level, and let's get started showing you a couple of the projects. So this is a long ribbed scarf that I did. It's 200 rows with a 60 stitch cast on, and you'll see where I used markers at this is the seam, at every 50 rows. And the inspiration for this scarf was that I have a long loved J. Crew scarf from several years ago before I learned to knit, and one of my goals I've mentioned in 2025 is to recreate some of the fast fashion things I own with some slow fashion things that I think I will appreciate even more. And so I used that as a gauge for like the length and width of this project, and I'm really happy with how it came out. And one of the things I love is that I got to, design the yarn. So a few people have commented and joked like, who else but you would come up with doing this? So the hot pink is Hot to Trot Worsted Alpaca by Chelsea Yarns, and then the mohair that I held with it. So again, this could be a good low risk project. If you're not used to holding a mohair with something, I would definitely suggest giving this a try because it just makes it so worth it. It's a Surrey alpaca actually, so not necessarily like a kid silk type mohair, but it's a Surrey alpaca. So this is Peach Sweater by La Bien Aimée, and Chelsea Yarns also has a really good Surrey alpacas. So there's lots of Surrey alpacas, which are an alternative to a mohair. If mohair is too scratchy for you, it's very soft. I literally fell asleep on it one night while I was knitting it. So this is one of the projects. And like I said, my biggest tip with you guys for this one is going to be to place the markers at every 50 rows so that you aren't having to count. You'll have to count up to the 50, but something I hear with ribbing too, I want to give a little tip and trick here, is that people think that they have to count with ribbing to make sure that their next stitch is a knit or a purl. And so place markers for that too. So like I said, this is a 60 stitch cast on. So place markers every 10 or 20 stitches. And then you'll know that like when you hit that marker, you should end on a purl stitch and start on a knit stitch. And a couple rows in, hopefully you'll be able to start reading down your knitting. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. And you'll be able to recognize what's a knit and what's a purl. But if not, like I said, at the very least, you know, place those markers every 10 or 20 stitches, and just know that if you've, you know, hit the wrong stitch when you approach that marker, then just tink back, tink being knit backwards, so take out stitch by stitch, that you can tink back to that marker and not have to, you know, like rip out a whole row or anything like that. So that's a little trick. All right, so let's talk about some of the other projects. So this is a 2-color head warmer I did. So this is the same Hot to Trot, and then this is the color Cocoa. So the same worsted alpaca with Chelsea, and again, all held together with the color Peach Sweater by LBA. And so this is meant to be a twisted headband. So once we get through all of the projects that I'm going to show you, I will show you the twist in this, because I've gotten a couple of questions on how to do that before from people who have bought similar patterns from me, and so I'll show you that hack. And then these are hand warmers. So just a rib hand warmer, again 2 colors, which is kind of fun. And so pretty simple pattern here to do. You've just got a 1x1 rib, and then you seam it together up to the thumb. Leave maybe 1.5 inches or so for your thumb, and you know, measure a couple of times and finish only once, so you can figure out what you're comfortable with for your thumb there. This is the one that I have finished. I wanted to show you guys the seaming, so I left that one undone, but you can see how this one looks. Now, if the suggested number of rows is not right for you, then again, measure to, you know, your specific width. It's meant to be about 1/2 and 1/2. So you can see where, you know, this is right about 1/2. I don't have it quite on right, but it's right about 1/2 and 1/2 for me. But if it's not 1/2 and 1/2 for you, you know, measure. One size is not meant to fit all, so just keep measuring. It's just a basic recipe, and it's meant to be adapted to whatever the fit you want. And then the final project, so we've got the scarf, the hand warmers, the head warmer. The final project I did are leg warmers. So I was wearing these around the other day, and when I took them off, I was very sad about how cold I was. So a little bit different colors here. I will share what these colors are, and then we'll get into a few specifics about the patterns. So this one is Garthnor Organics in their worsted base, which is called Gweld, and it's just their natural base. And then this is still that Cocoa, the Chelsea Yarns Cocoa worsted alpaca base. And the Surrey alpaca I held with this is also LBA, but it's confetti cake. So what's really fun about it, if you can see, is there's just little, you know, peaks of color throughout, which just keep it interesting and make it really fun. So if you follow me on Instagram, I'll post some pictures of the other projects that I did with the same colorways, and you can see how they came together. They're really fun. So these ones are for the IU Notre Dame game on Friday. So I'm trying not to freeze. 8 p.m. game in South Bend, going to be cold. So let's talk a little bit about the rest of our finishing. So about how we're going to seam our arm warmers together and how we're going to fold over our head warmer. And I seamed this scarf the same way I seamed the arm warmers. So when you watch that, you'll be able to know, how to proceed with that. So, and then again, the patterns will be live on my website on December 20th. Let's take a look at our seaming here. So I've left a long tail here, a fairly long tail. Should be plenty to get through. I'm going to thread the yarn onto a darning needle. And we're going to start, so this is going to be our right side, and we're going to go from the left side to the right side, and we're going to go bottom to top. So bottom up. So I'm in here at the bottom of this, and I'm going to find my next stitch. So if you can see this V here, I'm going to go in with my yarn into that V, and I'm going to find the next stitch over here, which I'm actually going to go ahead. I'm kind of starting one stitch down on this side, which will be fine. You can kind of fudge your seaming a little bit. So I'm going to start going into this, and then that way it will start to kind of line up. So one thing that I did not do with these arm warmers, which I would maybe suggest doing, is you can bind off in pattern or use like Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off to make sure that your bound off side is not much tighter than your cast on side. So because of that, I'm fudging a little bit to make up for that. Okay, so here's my second stitch up on this side, or what I'm making my second stitch. And then I'm going to come over here, and we'll kind of see this coming together, and find my second stitch up on this side. You can see the stitches feeding into the side over here. So I'm going to leave these loose on purpose, and then I'm going to show you what happens when we make them tighter. So you can go like, I would say 5 or so stitches up as you're seaming without tightening your stitches. So I'm going to go one more on each side. And you can see where I've made this seam, and now I'm going to tighten it up. And there we go. So you can see how the seam just disappears and it becomes seamless. So I'm going to keep going up on this side. So we're trying to match up our left and our right. And I'm going under both legs of the stitch here to do this. So I'm going under both legs of the stitch on each side. And again, we're going to end up going up, say 4 or 5 without tightening. And then we'll tighten and see what happens. It can be hard to find your place after you tighten. Okay, so this is where we tightened last. And see how when I do that, the seam disappears. So if it's hard for you to see where you are at after you've pulled it a little bit tighter, then just go ahead and keep it a little bit looser, or loosen back up the stitch on the row below till you find your place. Okay, I think I've come up to a place where I want to start measuring whether or not this is about the right place for my thumb. So I'm going to slip my hand in and see how I'm doing. Well, it looks like I want just a couple more before I am in a good place with my thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and go up just a couple more. Okay. See, I've tightened that seam and I'm at a place where I can go ahead and go to the wrong side of my fabric. Actually, I'm going to go back over here to the left-hand side and go to the wrong side of my fabric. And I'm going to leave about a 1.5 inch gap here for my thumb. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to kind of carry this yarn up the side here in whatever way. It's on the wrong side, so it honestly doesn't really much matter what you do. And I'm gonna get to a place where I might wanna come back. I think I've gone about 3 rows or so here. I'll see how that does, and I'm gonna come back to the outside with my yarn. Okay, let's see how this is. Yep, so I'm right here, right back where I'd want to pick back up for my thumb. So I've got about 3 more rows where I can seam on both sides. I'm going to take it off because it's a little bit easier to do, but you feel free to leave it on as you're seaming up. So I'll make sure to count down the 3 rows that I want to leave over here. So I just did this. I'm going to come across to right here. And right here, and then our final little bit on both sides over here. Okay, and we're going to tighten that up there. We've left a nice little hole for our thumb, and I'm going to kind of go back and just reinforce this wrong side here. See, this has a little bit of an overlap here, so I'm just going to kind of go back in with the tail yarn and just kind of reinforce back down to the thumb. And by doing that, I'll kind of make sure that where this thumb opening isn't going to be, I think I've lost my carry along yarn. If I do that, then it will make sure if I kind of weave that end in right back down to where I had split for the thumb, then I'll make sure that there's no, really big gap that's going to end up here. So I'm just going in underneath that seam and just kind of weaving in back and forth on the wrong side. And I'm going to go right back down to where I started back up on that thumb. And I'm just going to reinforce that right there. So now I've woven in that end, and you can go back in as many times as makes you feel good, and then you can just cut that tail off. So the seam doesn't have to be perfect, although I don't think there was anything particularly wrong with that one. I think we did a pretty good job. So that is our second arm warmer seamed. And again, I seamed the scarf in the same way. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to seam our head warmer. All right, so we've got our flat piece right here. And what I am trying to do is from the wrong side, which it honestly makes no difference what the wrong side of this is. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong side, because when you change color with the ribbing, it's not like when you change color with stockinette and it looks so much different on one side or the other. So this is not necessarily meant to have a right or a wrong side. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my 2 pieces up like a C. So they're like, C's that are facing each other. and we're going to overlap them. So we're going to put one piece and then our second piece, our third piece, and then actually we want this on the outside, sorry. So I need to start with our brown, our pink, our brown, and our last pink. Okay, so see how this is kind of sandwiched together here? We had two C's and we kind of just slid them into each other. And the biggest thing we want to do is just make sure that our tail is going to be on the outside so we can start seaming it through. So we've got our little C here, our little C's that are sandwiched together, and we're going to go through each layer. So we're going to go ahead and go through the brown layer and the pink layer, and then our next brown layer. We were already, our end was attached to our pink layer over here. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of keep going through this until we get to the end. So I'm really just going through the edge stitches of this, and I'm trying to pick up both edge stitches because it will make it a little bit more stable if you can do that. So I've got all my edge stitches here, and I'm just going to keep seaming through. Make sure we don't lose any pieces along the way. Okay. Grab this brown piece in the middle that seems to be wanting to fall. And again, just keep going back and forth through these edge pieces. If you can get into both legs, it will just make it that much more secure. And the other thing about these projects, I missed this little brown piece in the middle. The other thing about these projects that are great is that the head warmers and the hand warmers and the leg warmers, really, those don't take much time. I mean, I've had people tell me that they're getting through these projects, not the scarf, of course, at 200 rows, but the little projects, I've had people tell me that they're getting through them in a couple hours a piece. And so if you can do that, if you're pretty quick, these might make a really nice little last minute gift set for somebody. And the yarn requirements, as you can tell, are not extremely demanding on anything really but the scarf. So if you're looking for, quick, potentially scrap yarn projects, then you can, use these patterns. Again, that will be free through January 1st on my website. I'm just kind of weaving in the ends at this point. And you can make a nice little gift set for somebody. Okay, so that was our wrong side that we seamed. And here is our cute little twisted right side. And there you go. We have our cute little twist headband. Well, thanks y'all for tuning in, and I hope this gives you guys something to do in the next couple of weeks while everybody is maybe traveling and with family or wanting to start a new hobby. So happy holidays to everybody, and cheers. Thanks y'all.